Hello, and welcome to the Future is Bilingual podcast. Thank you for tuning in. I'm so excited to share this interview that I recorded with Tommy. He is an English teacher living in Germany, and along with his wife, they are raising their 3 kids bilingually. But not only that, Tommy was also raised bilingually, so he has a ton of personal experience and wisdom to share with us. This interview is full of amazing quotes that I will be sharing on my Instagram page after I publish this episode, little by little. There was just so many good things that he said. So if you're not already following me there, you can head over to Instagram and look up The Future is Bilingual, one word, and you'll find me there. So come check that out. I don't want to give too much away, but we do cover a lot of topics in this interview. So stay tuned. So, Tommy, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, about your family, what you do, what languages you speak, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Hi. My name is Tomasz. I'm half Hungarian, but everyone calls me Tommy because it's so much easier to pronounce, right? I'm half Brit, half Hungarian. I was born into a bilingual family in the UK. My mother, she came from Hungary. My father is from my father from the UK. And I'm 31 years old. I lived my whole life until 7 years ago in the UK, but now I live with my family in Germany. What languages do I speak?
Yes.
I speak English, as you can
Of
hear.
course.
This is my non-native, or let's say my native non-official mother tongue. I speak Hungarian, which is, considering who my mother is, my native mother tongue. And at school, and at university, I learned French, German, and Spanish. At university, I only went on to study German and Spanish. But this was for me, perhaps this was a shame that I did it. This was probably a shame that I did this, because I would have loved to have continued with my journey in French. Since graduation 7 years ago from university, I've completely forgotten all my Spanish, or pretty much everything. But as I am immersed in the German everyday culture, I speak German pretty much fluently.
Yeah. So, I mean, your brain has to give somewhere. If you're focusing so much on the German, it is hard to keep a balance with all the other tertiary, the additional languages, considering how many you're already studying. And we just published an episode on language attrition. So definitely take a listen if you haven't heard already. Similar, I didn't know you were so close to me in age. So I'm 32, so we're very close in age. I also studied French and Spanish at school, so quite similar there. And why don't you tell us what you do? Because I feel like that is pertinent.
I'm a freelance English teacher here in Nuremberg, the city that I live in, Bavaria, southern Germany. I find my own private students, and I teach them, or I work for language schools who offer me students, and therefore I work in a sort of parallel streams. Either there's the constant flow of language school students coming into me, or there's a constant stream of private students coming into me. So this is what it means to sort of be a freelancer, at least here in Germany. To be able to work in the public sector as an English teacher in schools is a bit more complicated. I would have to restart my bachelor, and this would take me 7 years. So, had I started 7 years ago, I would be finished by now. So technically speaking, I could already be working in a German public sector school.
Mm-hmm.
This is not my intention though in life. My
Mm-hmm.
intention in life is to help those who sort of fall through the cracks of the German school system, and
Mm.
those whose grades are sort of dangling by a thread. So I give them
Yeah.
sort of like a second lease of life,
Yeah.
which makes this gives me a sort of this fulfills me. This gives me sort of like a
Purpose. Yeah.
fulfilling purpose. Exactly, exactly. It makes me feel like I'm actually doing something good.
Yeah.
Um,
I totally understand. I also tutor on the side since I stopped working and I became a stay-at-home parent. And it is, you get that one-on-one connection, which we don't always have time for in the classroom, but also the
yeah,
students that are struggling the most are the ones who are going to search out a tutor. So I think it is very fulfilling when you see them, things will click and things that were
yeah.
very hard now make sense. Um, so yeah, that's wonderful. And how did you choose to go to Germany and to Bavaria? Was that a specific decision, or was that just how did that come?
Well, they say that there's no such thing as a sort of true love story, but
Ah,
this one is like out of a fairy tale. Um, Me and my back then, she was my girlfriend, my
hmm.
one true girlfriend. Um, we had been writing online together on a platform called Interpals. Back
Oh,
when we started, right? Have you heard of this? I don't know whether you
no,
might have heard of this.
no, but it does
It's
sound
an
romantic.
it's an
I like the
online
pen pals.
portal.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. An online portal where you could write messages to each other.
Hmm.
Um, and interestingly enough, my wife, back then she was my girlfriend, then she became
Hmm.
my fiance, then my wife. She had also been to Hungary as an exchange student for the organization Youth for Understanding. And Youth for Understanding basically gets people from different cultures, different backgrounds, and and offers them the chance to go on exchange to a new country. My wife originally wanted to go to Australia,
Yeah.
uh, but this never worked out because of the financial side of it.
Hmm.
Being from a small village in Germany, this never really came to fruition.
Hmm.
Her backup plan was then to go to Hungary, and she fell in love with the country, she fell in love with the culture, fell in love with the people. And
Wow.
after she came back from exchange, she wanted to continue her journey, her Hungarian language journey. And she wrote to me on this online portal. I wrote back to her. We eventually met. Fell in love with each other, and we married. That
What
was
a
7 years
beautiful,
ago.
wow, what a beautiful story. And I mean, just that fate would have it that she would be sent to Hungary. That's just beautiful.
Well, had she been sent to Australia, we probably would never have met. We
Yeah,
probably would never have married. So you're right. You know, it's a fate. It's fate that really had it in for us.
that's beautiful.
I didn't think back then when we first met. I think it was about 11 years ago that this would we would get this far. You know,
Hmm.
within 11 years we're married. We have three children of our own.
Hmm.
We're living here. We have jobs. You know, this is something which people just dream of. You know,
Yeah.
they wake up, fall in love with someone, settle down, have kids,
Hmm.
jobs. You know, that is basically what everyone would love to have, and this
Yeah.
is what happened to me.
A
And I
stable
was like,
life. And
exactly. I
people
was
you
like,
love.
wow.
That's so you wake up and you're living the dream.
Yeah, exactly. I have to say that sometimes the dream is a bit, hairy. We have our hairy moments, but
Oh
who
yeah.
doesn't?
Right.
If you have children of your own, you get what I mean.
Oh yes.
But that's not to say that we don't love each other. Yes, we
Mhm.
might have our arguments. Yes, we might not see eye to eye on every single thing that we do, but we love each other. We love our kids. We love the
Mhm.
languages that we speak, and that's all that matters really for us at least.
Mhm.
So we can't say that um we can't say that we've got it perfect. Who has got it
Who?
perfect? There's no such thing as a perfect way in life where there's no arguments on things. We see eye to eye on everything. This doesn't exist. Uh, this is a complete fairy tale. So to believe in this, to believe in each other, what we have is that we believe in each other. We believe in each other's fates. If one of us has a bad day, we say to each other, look, come on, this happens. You don't take it on the chin and you move it for you move on to the next day. If we have a good day, we don't get too far ahead of ourselves. We try to stay as level-headed as possible, even even in language development. So I might have had a few bad interviews. I notice this is a language thing. This is a language barrier which I need to break down, and over time I have broken it down. That's not to say that it's completely broken down as such, but I am still working on this. I'm not a native German speaker, so there's always going to be that block in the road.
Well, I think you are hitting on a big point of a lot of the times we're talking about immigrant experience on this podcast, and there is something that we just, even no matter how good your language gets, I feel like there's still cultural references we're never going to understand. Even
Yeah,
people that
exactly.
live in a country for 30, 40, 50 years, they still are. If you didn't have your childhood in a country, I feel like there's just things that you had your childhood elsewhere and you have other experiences. And I don't know, childhood is a special time, which you can't
Yeah.
redo. So I have many questions. Your wife sounds like she shares your three languages. So she's a German native. Sounds like she knew English if she wanted to go to Australia. And then tell us how her language is, how her levels are.
Well, she's a native German speaker, and in Germany, what they do compared to nowadays in the UK is that they make it compulsory for you to learn English
Mm-hmm.
at a young level. So you'll be starting grade 5, and the first thing you'll be doing and you'll be learning English. Now, in the UK system, it was sort of like yeah, you have to learn a language. You have to learn a language because the decree comes from the top. It comes from government level that you have to learn a language. But we're sort of reluctant to learn the language because we still have this idea of English is an empirical language. We still have the empire. We still have the Commonwealth. So who needs another language? In Germany, it's a case of you learn a second language. In this case, it's English, and if you continue it into university, college level, then so be it. There are some who drop out of school or finish school in grade 9, and they don't go on to do any more English. But my wife, she went to university. She did a dual study system, which meant that she had to work she worked half of the time and she studied half of the time.
Wow.
She worked at HP, and at HP, as you know, it's an American company. You have to speak English. But in her line of work, it was more sort of a German department that she worked for. Nevertheless, her English, I would have to say, is for someone who is not a native, she is bang on the money. Bang on the money pretty much 90% of the time. So we're talking a woman with high intelligence. She says that she doesn't love languages like I do. When I teach a language, I like to go into the etymological background. So she's not someone who does this, but she loves her language. She can speak English really well. Her Hungarian, yeah, we don't speak it at home, so we can't ask her to be a native speaker like I am. Not even I'm a native speaker. I have to say that I speak English much better than I speak Hungarian. So this makes me sort of like yeah. I'm not as good. Yeah.
You're a heritage speaker because
Yeah,
it's
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. But her Hungarian skills are, they're good as well. She can understand. She can get through. She can speak a lot to my family in Hungarian. So I'm not, I can't complain with this either.
That's wonderful.
I'm
Yeah, that's
I'm
good.
I'm very proud. I'm very proud of her. I'm very proud of her. Very proud of my kids, who we're going to come to, I guess, a
Hmm.
bit later. Um, you know, because there's a lot which is going on, and she's developed those language skills to make herself as good as possible for what she can do. Yeah.
And I think that is that's wonderful, and that's such a good lesson for everyone because, not everybody is going to have that love of languages like a lot of us do who are listening probably, um, and that you and I have. But everyone can learn more than one language, and that's why if we give it to children young, we give them the gift of two languages or more. um, they're going to have that forever, whether they make it their career or not, whether they use it in the future or not. It's just everyone has that capacity. And you don't have
Mm.
to be a linguist or a language lover or any of those things to learn a language. If it's useful, then you will use it. So if you need it,
Yeah.
like your wife needs Hungarian because your family speaks Hungarian, same with me. I didn't know any Polish, but when I met my husband, I was like, okay, everybody speaks Polish. I need to learn this so I can understand what's happening. Um, and I think it's so important that, it needs to be useful. So parents, we need to keep minority languages useful for kids. Otherwise, they're not going to see the point. But
Mm.
also to have faith that everybody can learn another language. Like
Yeah.
don't, it
I
doesn't
mean,
take
I
any
say that.
special skills. Just
Sorry.
time.
I say this to all my students. Whether they're young, whether they're old, you're never too old, never too in quote unquote stupid.
Mm-hmm.
That's what lots of my students say, to learn a second language.
Mm-hmm.
I hear lots of people. I hear lots of people in my who who might be in their 40s, 50s, and they say, all I need is a bit of English to get by. I'm going to go on holiday, hopefully
Mm-hmm.
after the COVID period, to an English speaking country, possibly to the United States or to
Mm-hmm.
the UK, and I need to get by. I need to be able to do more than be able to order a beer in a
Mm-hmm.
pub. And I say, look, come on, you're never too old to learn it. And then they come up, then obviously the next thing that they say is, I'm too stupid to learn it.
Ah,
Now, that doesn't wash with me. That
yeah.
doesn't wash with me, because that's a case of this person not having enough. They
Self-confidence.
don't believe.
Yeah.
Exactly, they don't believe in themselves. They don't believe in themselves. They think, this is a psychological hurdle which I'm never going to be able to get over. You know, back then in school, I had rubbish grades. So what's
Mm.
going to change? What's going to change the situation now? And I say, look,
Mm-hmm.
come on, you're never too old to learn it. And this idea that you're stupid, forget about that altogether. Because if I was stupid, I wouldn't be speaking here to you in German or
Mm-hmm.
in English, and I wouldn't be able to explain things to you, which for German native speakers are like, what are you on about? Because there are certain parts of English grammar
Oh
which
yeah.
they think, you must be crazy. This doesn't exist in German, so how am I meant to understand it?
Oh yes,
You
I
know,
get that. I teach French and Spanish, and when you start doing subjunctive, like that's just what? Why does this exist? So same
yeah.
same idea. Hi guys. I hope you're enjoying today's episode. And if you are, please consider sharing it with a friend, tagging us on social media, or leaving us a review. You can tag us at The Future is Bilingual, one word, on Instagram. We really appreciate your support and all your help in sharing our podcast and getting it into the ears of people who'd be interested in hearing it. Thank you, thank you. And now back to the episode. Why don't you tell us more about your kids? You mentioned that you have 3 of them.
Yeah. We have 3 of them between the ages of 1 3/4 and 5 and a bit. Uh,
Not
you know,
big.
it's, the average age difference between all 3 is about 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
You are
my
in the
oldest,
trenches with me. I am in those trenches of 1.5 and 3. So I understand you.
Yeah, I have to say it's incredibly hard every single day trying to get through to them. Interestingly enough, when I look at the development of of the language we speak at home, you I get to the feeling that we sort of have this one person, one language sort of method, at least here in our house. Yeah. This is not to say that there are not other people who don't speak English or don't speak German to our kids, but it's me predominantly speaking the English to them, and it's my wife predominantly speaking German to them. Now, it's not to say that I don't speak German. It's just that as I am a native speaker of English, I prefer to teach them my native language than to teach a language that I learned at school, and that I'm not a native speaker.
And on top of, you're an English teacher, so
right, exactly.
What English teachers teach their own kids English?
I've got a perfect background. I've got the perfect base for it. You know.
You're the expert.
Exactly. Yeah, I am the expert. I could call myself the ace in the pack, if I really wanted to, which I'm not going to because that would be egotistical of me. But if I look at the development of how my kids have learned to speak English and German in their very small lifetimes, it has been amazing. From the first words of my oldest, Matthias, when he was at, I don't know what you call it in America, but we don't have it in Germany. We have kindergarten, which is from the age of 3, but before that we have sort of like creche in it. It's what we call it in the UK.
That's creche. The French word. There's no everything here before the age of 5 is paid, so you have to pay for either daycare when they're really young, and then at 2 and 9 months they can go into a preschool, and then that is till they're 5. But everything's paid for, so there's no sort of creche or anything like the French have that's paid for by this government, unfortunately.
It's not a problem though, because each country has a different system of making things happen. Looking at how my oldest started off with his basic language, basic words, he obviously, as he was immersed in German preschool, he had the first words that he spoke were obviously in German. But over a period of time, as has been proven by many studies, the kid's brain can pick up so much information within a very small period of time that you might, that from one day to the next, your kid might have 2, 3, 4 new words that they might be speaking in the language. And, my kids, all 3 of them have been picking up language since they recognize the sounds of the words. Looking at my youngest, who's going to be 2 in December, she can now speak to me pretty much almost in complete sentences in English. And I'm like, well, back up a second. You're not even 2 years old. What are you doing? This is a bit too quick for me. Let's rewind a bit on this tape. It's a bit too quick for me, but I am immensely
proud. Were they all born in Germany?
Yes, they were all born in Germany, and this has an influence obviously on the languages that they speak. The first language that they're going to speak is obviously going to be German, as a native, as they were born in Germany. But they have developed linguistically. They have developed so quickly, that we can't complain. We cannot complain about what they have done because it's been such a pleasure to see it. At times, it is obviously horrifying because you think, wow, you've learned a few too many words here. You've learned a few too many phrases that you shouldn't really be shouldn't be hearing.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you think, wow, how is this possible? How are you able to be able to speak so much in such a, in such a small period in such a short period
Yeah,
of time?
yeah.
It's but
I
it's
can
amazing.
I can really relate with my daughter, who's she'll be 2 in January, and
Mm,
it's just amazing when they come up with these sentences, and it's like, oh my God, you're a baby, but you have your own thoughts and you can communicate them. I think it is just, like you said, it's a pleasure because it's just so interesting every day. Like, what is she gonna say? And my
mm.
son, he's older, so we're more used to him speaking now. But it's hilarious. Sometimes it's just so funny what they'll say. And I think anyone who's listening that has little kids or has, nieces and nephews or works with children, I think, everybody knows. Little kids are just hilarious. And that must be why people teach kindergarten. I can't work with young students. I have, and it's not my niche, but I think it must be fun and funny to be with little kids all day.
That's it. I can't, for example, I don't have the patience to be able to teach young kids,
Yeah,
the age of say from the age of 3, 4 upwards. Because I already have 3 kids at home. I don't need extra kids. I don't need extra kids on the go, at work.
100%. I agree.
So my niche when I'm teaching is say, the age of the age of 13, 14 upwards. I would prefer to be aiming at business clientele. Those who are working in the business sector. But you
Hmm.
can't beggars can't be choosers. We can't always choose who we want to teach. And if something comes along and they're the ones who sort of take the bait, then
Yeah.
we teach them. Teaching is teaching. We take
Mhm.
we take on what we can teach. So yeah.
I have a question about your teaching. Is it just based in where you are, or do you do things online? Or how is that happening with quarantine and coronavirus and everything?
Well, the thing is, since the beginning of COVID here in Germany in the spring,
Hmm.
I, all teachers in Nuremberg and in the bigger area in Germany in
Hmm.
general have had to recalibrate themselves. Before COVID came,
Hmm.
heading in different directions, teaching different people. I actually enjoy I have to say, teaching face to face. It's so much
Hmm.
more enjoyable. But then suddenly, as the spring came and we found out about COVID coming in from different parts of the world,
Hmm.
there was this sort of feeling that the German government, and the Bavarian state government had to sort of react. How can we possibly make life
Hmm.
easier for all the citizens living in this country? And they came up with the idea that should you be teaching, you go online.
Hmm.
You're not allowed to go out. You're not allowed to even, you weren't even allowed to go to shops. I don't know how it was back in the US, but here in Germany, it was like a case of, the basics that you were allowed to do were go to the shop for food or
Hmm.
for toilet paper or for hygiene, for basically hygiene towels and things which are basic for everyday use.
Hmm.
Apart from that, things like schools, clubs, bars, whatever it was, they were all closed down. So that meant that all of us teachers had to recalibrate ourselves, and that included me. And I have to say, I didn't know anything about the idea of Zoom, for example,
Hmm.
until maybe April, May,
Most of
which
us
was
didn't.
quite. But it was, when people were talking about Zoom, I was like, what is Zoom? I've never heard of it. I was looking up on the internet, I was typing in furiously, what is Zoom? Enter, and it comes up with like, Zoom is this. I was like,
What
never
is
heard of
this?
it.
Hmm.
I've never heard of the thing. And then like, it was like, I opened it up for the first time. I was like, what is this thing? This looks like a classroom.
Hmm.
This looks like an online classroom with a whiteboard, and I can share my screen. It's like, well, isn't Skype any? Isn't Skype? Isn't doesn't Skype do that? And then I realized, well, Skype has become an old-fashioned tool. It's only really used by people who don't know anything else about about cyber,
Mhm.
about cyber products. So I at the moment I'm doing a lot of things um, via Zoom. That's also with students here in the area that I live in, but also with students further afield. I teach students within the whole of Germany, and quite a few of them, if you can imagine, live, say, the different, a distance between New York and Atlanta, Georgia. Well,
Mm.
okay, let's not take Atlanta, Georgia here because Atlanta, Georgia
Maybe
is
too
up the
far.
other. It's a bit too far, but you get the idea. It's quite a long way.
Far.
That
Yeah.
I can't drive there and drive back and still be on time for my next lesson,
Mhm.
which starts maybe 15 minutes, half an hour later. So this means I have to be taught. I have to go on Skype. I have to go either on Skype or on Zoom, and I have to say, since I got into Zoom and doing online teaching, it's been enjoyable, but I miss doing face-to-face teaching.
Yeah. There's no replacement, but we're doing the
No,
best we can. So are schools open in Germany? I know we're now just turning into a discussion about coronavirus times, but I'm interested.
well, I mean, at the interestingly, in Germany, the system is different from state to state. So,
Mm.
some schools started already at the beginning of August, but here in Bavaria, we are the last ones to go back to school. We started at the end. We started at the beginning of September,
Hmm.
and there was a lot of furious conversations going on in the local governments. How are we going to be able to keep our kids safe?
Hmm.
What are the what are the things that we have to do to make sure that the kids stay safe? Do they have to wear masks in the classrooms or only when they're out in the schoolyard, as you guys in America love to say?
Hmm.
Um, or people were furiously going around, oh, this is not right. And I even remember a day before school started, someone brought legal action against the Bavarian state government,
Mm.
saying that using masks in classrooms was was basically against your freedom of speech.
Oh boy.
Obviously, obviously the legal action was kicked out the minute it got into the court. The judge said, "Well, you must be off your trolley. You must be completely crazy. Would you
Hmm.
like would you like to infect other school kids with COVID-19?" This was the basis of kicking this case out. So
Hmm.
in Bavaria, at least, we have the strict rule: public transport and closed places, masks at all times. If you're at school, in the classroom, you don't need to wear masks, but you do need to wear masks if you are walking around in the schoolyard outside, because airborne COVID is a big killer as well. I don't know how many cases of COVID you have had in New York. You
Yeah.
live in New York somewhere, right?
I live in New England, Massachusetts. So a little bit
Massachusetts,
north
all right.
of New York State, but
Okay.
oh
Yeah,
yeah, New York
right.
was awful. It
Yeah.
was awful.
So
It's
I
just that.
mean, as you can imagine, it's from state to state different. There are different, some states say, forget the masks altogether, we'll do it our own way. And then you see the big, then you see the
Spikes.
consequences
Hmm.
of exactly the
Yeah.
spikes of that. So,
Oh, hmm, we have that.
yeah,
We have that in the States with our own states that make their own rules. And we also had schools returning at different times. So I think Georgia spiked again, Arizona was spiking. Yeah, Texas, lots of
mm,
that's another subject. We can get back to languages, but I was just curious how that
yeah,
looks. So if anyone is listening and is not a native English speaker, they could contact you for English lessons via
of
Zoom.
course.
Okay,
Yeah,
well, great. I'll put your info into the show notes, and then people can just click and find you there. So I will make sure to add that because I do see statistics of who's listening, and it's not just the U.S. and it's not just England. So I think we do have some listeners that are in other countries that are maybe listening to hear English because I know I do that for my languages. I like to listen to podcasts in the languages I'm maintaining. So yeah, if you're interested in lessons, we will put that in the show notes.
super.
How
Yeah.
do you stay motivated to keep teaching your kids? I mean, you're an English teacher, but your own kids, how do you stay motivated to keep giving them English? And, do they respond to you in German ever? How does that work?
My oldest has a tendency to revert to German. But more recently, he has realized that he's not going to get a German response out of me, so he has to figure out a way of saying it to me in English. I mean, yes, I do say to him, yes, I react to him when he says something to me in German. I react to him in English,
Hmm.
but I try not to react at all. I try to say, sorry, I don't understand you. Could you
Hmm.
please say that just to pretend as if I wouldn't understand him, is to
Yeah.
say, could you repeat that please to me in English? So that basically he is forced to think, okay, there's a barrier here.
Hmm.
Dad speaks to me in English, mum speaks to me in German, and I can speak to my dad in German, but he's only going to react to me in English.
Hmm.
How I keep myself motivated, that's a good question, because I I there are days when I get really frustrated as an English teacher with my students that I wish that they would just be a bit more proactive. And then I
Hmm.
think look at my kids and they're incredibly proactive, very bright kids. But I think to myself, there are some days when there's not when I think to myself I could possibly do more as an English teacher to help them. I sometimes um, lose my rag very quickly. If someone says something wrong to me in English, I react badly. Then I take a step back, assess the position, and say, look, come on, they are only this age. They don't mean it. They can't
Hmm.
help it. I shouldn't expect wonders out of it. So to keep motivated, I think to myself, they're doing really well. Their journey has only really just started.
Yeah.
They've got a long distance ahead of them. They
Hmm.
have a
It's
lot
a
of potential. It's not like it's a marathon. It's a marathon. It's not a short distance short distance race where
sprint.
they can
Hmm.
exactly. Um, so I think to myself, you know, keep plugging on, keep really trying to hit it out with them, and maybe eventually they will grow, they will improve their language skills. But they are
Hmm.
doing so well, Heather. They are really, I can't praise them enough. Even
Hmm.
if I think to myself at times they are incredibly lazy. That's not language learning though. That's just kids. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But I think your method of just gently reminding them, the little, oh, sorry, what did you say? Kind of
Mm,
pretending like I didn't hear you. It's not that you spoke the wrong language. It's just more gentle. I think
mm.
that's good. And your kids are still young, so they're still kind of navigating. And I think that I just think it's great that they're gonna already have English along with German. And I had a question about that. I don't want to forget to ask you what will happen later in school, because you said all German students learn English. Will they have to take it, or can they move on to another language?
No.
Have you thought of that?
I don't think that's going to be possible.
Mm,
That would be amazing. If you could just say,
like a test or something to test out?
you you guys are too good for us. You guys are too good for this English lesson. You can go and learn Latin, or you can go and learn
Yeah.
French, or learn Russian, or Japanese, or Korean, or
Mm.
who knows what language there'll be next in the world market. I mean,
Right.
Arabic is now one of the biggest growing languages here in Europe, at least. So,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Arabic,
who
Mandarin.
exactly? Who knows what's going to be the next biggest language in the world? As statistics show, the importance of English is still quite high, but we're seeing a reduction in the amount of teaching hours of English
Oh.
and an increase of the teaching hours of, say, Arabic, Chinese
Mm-hmm.
Mandarin, and
Mm-hmm.
Japanese. three of the biggest world markets are opening up at the moment. You know,
Interesting.
we see the UAE, we see United Arab Emirates. If you go on websites like TEFL, you know, teaching English as a
Yep.
foreign language, they have their own American and British websites. There are a ton of job applications for people going to China, to Japan, or somewhere in the Arab states. And the question obviously is, what is going to happen to does this mean that there's going to be a reduction in the importance of English? I don't think so. English is always going to be somewhere at the top.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I get the feeling that my kids will not be able to drop out of English that quickly. You know, going back to the original question, I don't like to go on tangents because
Mm-hmm.
you know, I seem to be waffling here a bit too much.
No.
Um, my kids will not be. I intend for my kids not to miss out on any English teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the level of English teaching in German schools cannot be comparable to that of a native speaker. Native speakers know their stuff better than someone who might have been in an English speaking country for 5 years or for
Mm-hmm.
10 years of their life. But I have a feeling that my kids will still be sitting in English lessons, um, and I will be correcting all the mistakes that they that they
Mm-hmm.
make in their English lessons. As an English teacher, this is going to be my job as their father. Yeah, so
Although,
I have a feeling this is where we're going to be when they get to school.
mm-hmm. Although as you were saying that, just made me think about I had two students that were heritage Spanish speakers, so they spoke Spanish at home. But that when they were still in my Spanish 2 course, because they didn't really know how to write, they hadn't really ever formally learned like how to form past tense and things like that. So I think even if your children speak English with you and they're fluent, they can still probably benefit from having formal education, because all of us in our native language, we have formal education for 12 years at least, usually. Um, so yeah, at first I was thinking they don't need English; they can just pass out of it. But they will probably still learn things, and you know, you read text depending on the level that they're in. Um, it will probably be easy for them, but still, writing papers that's not an easy skill. And you know, when you're young, it's good practice to write things. And I just haven't ever thought about this. My kids are still so young, and they're never going to have a chance to have Polish in school. So this is not an issue for me at all. But
And I'd say that this is a big shame. The minority languages that we have in the world, you know, for example,
mhm,
Hungarian. Hungarian is apparently, according to some statistics, only spoken by about 13 million people in the world. You know,
mhm,
so I'm one of the lucky, me and my wife are you know, are two of the lucky ones.
yeah,
My kids have been started to become immersed more in Hungarian because we decided to find ourselves a Hungarian tutor, but she's not really a tutor, she just plays with the kids and she only speaks to them in Hungarian. So
mm,
they understand Hungarian as well a bit more than they did. And interestingly, my kids they know Hungarian nursery rhymes or kindergarten rhymes,
oh
you know,
yeah,
so um, to
it's
hear
great.
this as a native speaker or, you know, as a sort of heritage speaker of the language,
Mhm,
this sort of brings a sort of a tear of happiness to my eyes when I hear this because I think,
mhm,
you know, that is something which is amazing that you will never be able to um you won't be able to find that you won't be able to get that in a school, you know, because
mhm,
my kids won't be able to learn Hungarian at school. They'll
no,
only be able to
not
maximum.
enough.
No,
Uh,
exactly. And my mum, my mum, for example, when she hears my kids speaking or singing to her in Hungarian, she always says to me, "Why don't I speak a bit more?" And I say, "Look, I would speak to them more, but I would rather they be immersed with natives than
mhm,
heritage speakers. Heritage speakers, yeah, we know the language, but
mhm,
we make mistakes. You know, and,
mhm.
native speakers, they know the language better than anyone else. You
Yeah, they
probably
have
know
that
this with,
sense that they're just this sounds right. And
yeah,
as a
exactly.
learner, it takes forever to get to that point to just know when something sounds right. If you can even
Yeah.
get there, you have to really be immersed.
mean, personally, when I speak to my relatives in Hungary or friends in Hungary, I say something and I realize, yeah, I made a mistake there.
Mm,
I'm not going to be able to, but I'm not going to be able to resurrect that one anymore. That one's been and gone. Um, Obviously, I can't expect myself to not make the mistakes as I don't speak Hungarian every day. Interestingly enough, if I may,
mhm,
when I was growing up in the UK, my first language I actually spoke was Hungarian. I understood more Hungarian than I did English, and when I went to kindergarten, that came to a few minor mishaps. For example, someone might have said something to me in English, to which point I was like, I don't understand you. You're
mhm,
talking to me in a language that I've heard, but I can't comment to you back in this language. And
mhm.
the kindergarten teacher said to my parents, isn't it about time that you started speaking to your child in English? We're already speaking to him in English, but he seems to be speaking more to us in Hungarian. So
Oh,
I don't know how this worked over a time, how I managed, how I then reverted back to English. But
mhm.
I can tell you when I was at school, going through puberty, I had there was a period when I said I don't want to speak in that effing language to my mum,
Oh,
and that obviously made my mum very disappointed.
mhm,
Um, Looking back on that, I wish I'd never said that, but we always regret things later
mhm,
in life.
mhm.
But I've come to realize that I made a mistake back then, but I've now sort of I've
You've-
I've I've gone back on that mistake by, for example, during my gap year, going to a Hungarian school and learning the Hungarian language properly. And
mhm.
I completed a language certificate to a B2 level. So technically
Oh,
speaking,
that's great.
I'm pretty much native speaker here, or I should be.
Mhm,
But I as an adult looking back on my childhood, I wish I had not done these things, because that had a detrimental effect on my language development.
mhm,
I sidelined Hungarian completely and tried to go, and just went 100% on English.
mhm.
Had I not done this, I guess my Hungarian level would have been higher, and I would trust myself now to try and help my kids learn Hungarian as kids. But
Mhm.
who knows what,
Oh, yes.
it's always a case of ifs and ifs and ifs and ifs, so
Right.
we have
But
no idea what would have happened.
I think we can take something from your story though, because this podcast is for parents, but it's also for people learning languages. And people might be learning a heritage language again, like you. You went back and you got that test to the B2 level, which is amazing. So for American listeners, because we don't use that system, that is the high intermediate. So getting really, it's pretty advanced. Um, and I think also for parents, if you have a child that's refusing to speak your language, that is rejecting your language, that can be very, it's a blow if it's your native tongue that they're rejecting. But just to know that that doesn't mean they will never speak your language. You said you were a teen. Teens are very emotional. Their hormones are crazy.
Mm,
Little kids can do it. There's all sorts of reasons. We don't know what's happening at school, what kids are saying to them. So there's all sorts of reasons that they might push back at you. And I just think that it, whatever gift you've given them, whether it's just the first 2 years of their life to more or less, I think it's still there. It's still a part of them, even if you haven't spoken your native language to your kids at all. They still have the heritage. They know that they are from this country. That you guys speak that language, and I just think it's never too late. They might become an adult and decide that they want to learn this language now. They want to learn more.
mm,
Everybody
mm,
comes to these realizations in their own time. but I do think
Yeah.
everyone is interested. Everybody has their identity, and they wonder about themselves, about their past, their grandparents, and how people have moved, different countries. And I do
Mm.
think, it's hard to not put pressure and to feel so sad when someone, your dear child tells you that they never want to speak your language. I can't imagine. My kids are still little, so no one has said that to us yet. But that's why I made this podcast. I want to hear from other people who are farther down this journey. And you have both sides, being raised bilingually and then now raising your kids trilingually even. I think
Mm.
it's great that you found someone that speaks Hungarian. So, if you don't feel confident doing it yourself, you've been able to find someone to kind of fill that spot. And I can't imagine how wonderful to hear these kids singing little nursery rhymes. That is like the best thing. I just think that's so sweet and so cute. And you probably haven't even thought about those nursery rhymes for, 20 years, maybe more, right? Because that's just
Well,
something
that's it exactly.
it's so far ahead.
There are some of those nursery rhymes that I have to say I probably only really learnt when I was maybe going through my teens. You know what I mean? Or there were some of them that I hadn't, obviously, that now I'm looking back on them, I haven't heard since I must have been maybe growing up myself 2, 3 years old, you know. So looking back, it's sort of, as a parent, we are always self-reflecting, even not on a linguistical basis, but also on the basis of, for example, what our kids do, you know, um,
Yep.
that the first step that they take, the first time that they speak, the first time that they crawl, that turning over, that thing that, when they turn over their shoulder, you're always thinking back. I wonder how it was for me back then. I wonder how it was I wonder how it was, how I was like, how
Yeah.
easy it was for me to do things like this.
Oh, yeah.
And I have to say one thing, that going back to your point about society,
Mm-hmm.
growing up in England during the 2000s and in a school, pubescent kids who came from a monolingual background, there was always this sort of like cockerels in a farmyard. You're not English, you haven't got an English first name, and like, you're always being poked at. There was always something that other kids managed to poke something out of me, It was either your first name isn't English, how can you call yourself an Englishman? Or, an English boy, or you're
Oh,
too
geez.
small, you can't run, you can't play football, or, soccer, and, you guys call it soccer, but we call it football.
Football.
So there was always something that they were all somehow able to poke something out of me. And I think this had an influence on me then going back home and saying, I don't want to speak that language with you. I can't be heard speaking that language with you. Um, it was more of a case of, not that I didn't want to speak it. It was probably more of a case of, if I speak it, then I feel more like I am not one of them. One of the kids out playing in the playground or playing football or whatever. I always had this feeling that there was something different to me. Yeah, whether it was
Yeah.
either my size or my background or my physical features, there was always something about me that made me completely different to those other kids. And I think the problem is that society has an effect on us, and we as kids growing up, we sort of feel isolated into a position where, if you don't look like them, you don't speak like them, or you don't have a name like them, then we should feel isolated. Now,
Yeah,
the
the
problem
separate.
is, in my opinion, this comes from the top. This comes from the top. As you guys in America have, you got a president who doesn't ex
Oh,
who
God.
loves to create divisive politics. it shouldn't be allowed to happen.
Yeah.
It has a detrimental effect on the development of a kid, both physically and mentally, and also linguistically. Because if I don't know what your maiden name was, Heather, and I will not ask you. This is your podcast. I shouldn't even be asking questions on this.
No worries.
But if you look at my actual first name, it's not Tommy. On my birth certificate, it's a Hungarian first name. It's and my parents gave me a Hungarian first name because I have an English surname. They wanted me to see that I have heritage, that I belong to two cultures and not just one thing. I'm not just a simple English boy. I was born into a fantastic background of history, and
it's so different
we
how
should be
adults, like we see it as
exactly.
parents, it's a wonderful thing. My whole podcast, I'm going on about how this is a gift, but as a child, we have, I do worry, like my child's going to see this as a gift that I've raised them in this other language and they struggle to express themselves in the majority language sometimes. So yeah, I think we see it so differently. Your parents probably saw themselves balancing your identity and your name and giving you this
Exactly.
wonderful heritage, and it's a struggle. It can be a struggle. Fortunately,
And
kids are cruel.
I would say to those parents who are listening, who who come from backgrounds like ours, that yes, your kids might reject your heritage language or your even your native tongue, but you should never give up the hope that, as you said, that your kids will eventually see that it's good for them, because you don't because being the same as those kids out in the schoolyard is boring.
Yeah.
Later in life, when you go through late higher education, you go to your college or your university, you don't want to be Joe Bloggs coming off the street from Boston, Massachusetts. So you want to be someone who sticks out from the crowd. And people ask me, why do I call myself Tommy? It's not because I'm ashamed of my first. In actual fact, I'm really proud of my first name. I'm proud to be different. Yeah. The reason that I call myself Tommy is because people completely lose the pronunciation of my name. They
You're doing it for
completely.
the other person. You want to make them feel comfortable. It's not
I
about
don't
you.
want them to exactly. I don't want them to feel, oh, he's a bit different. He's got a different first name to me. He's not a he's not a Tommy Bradford. He's really something completely different. I don't do it for myself. I did this for myself once upon a time, and it didn't really do me any favors. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now I'm doing it for you. I'm doing it for those of you out there who feel uncomfortable when you think to yourselves, I don't like his first name. I'd rather he call himself something which is a bit easier to pronounce. Yeah, I'm doing it for those who are ignorant, those who don't understand the heritage that we come from, those who don't have the benefit of the heritage we come from. America is a country of lot of immigrants.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but the UK as well. The UK has so many different heritages going through its ports every year. It's amazing. It's a melting pot. We need to be proud of where we've come from, but the problem is the politics and the society that we live in doesn't allow us to be proud of this.
Yep. That is what we were trying to fight against, to normalize this, that this is something, diversity is something to be proud of. Having another heritage and wanting to learn about it is something that you should be proud of and you should go for. Do you have a proud bilingual moment or a bilingual parenting moment that you'd like to share
Hmm.
besides your kids singing those nursery rhymes?
Well, I mean, I think that is my proud moment.
Yeah.
I think that is my proud moment. The time when you hear that tune that you recognize from somewhere. Yes, yes, my kids don't know the words of those nursery rhymes, but they put the effort into trying to pronounce them, to pronounce those words which are incredibly, incredibly hard to pronounce even for a native.
Mhm.
Um, that has to be my proudest moment. The moment that you realize we've made a breakthrough
Yeah.
with one of the languages. This is probably one of my proudest moments. But maybe another proud moment was when the first time all three of my kids came to me and said an English word to me.
Oh.
And that was like, wait, hang on. I might need to clear my ears here because I might have just misheard you what you just said, but I
Yeah.
believe you just spoke to me in English for the first time.
Oh.
And that sort of sets your heart going. And you
Mhm.
think, I must have done something right here because
I can do this.
that because they've done it. They made that psychological breakthrough, and you think, yeah, you're on a good road. You're on the road. You're not on the road to nowhere. You're on the road to
Mhm.
somewhere.
Right. Yeah, we're getting somewhere with this. They're actually picking it up and using it, to actually communicate something with us. It's great. Could you teach us a word or a phrase in one of your languages?
Let me teach you one of my favorite words in Hungarian, which not many people can get perfect.
Oh boy.
Translated, it means for your health.
Hmm.
Now the thing is, in Hungary, whether you either sneeze or you finish your food, people always say for your health. Now in the
Oh,
English language, we don't have this. We don't have this. We don't have a phrase for this.
no.
We're sort of like, you've eaten your food. So what? What do you want?
Good job.
What do you want me to say to you?
Yeah.
Congratulations. Would you like a medal? But in
Hmm.
Hungarian, we say the word egészségedre.
Oh, wow. I'm not even going to attempt because if anyone's listening from Hungary, I don't want to butcher your language. Could you say it one more time?
Egészségedre. For your health.
For your health. Is
Um,
that used in
I
any other situation? So finishing a meal, sneezing, is it different than when you cheers? Because I know in Polish they use the same thing for cheers as when someone sneezes, which is also
yeah,
for your health.
we use this as well when you say cheers. We
Oh,
always say for your health as well. It's always everything. All of these sort of things. They are seen as a sign of for your health.
mhm.
Please stay healthy, basically,
Yeah.
and those who are, if anyone's listening in from Hungary and is probably sort of screwed their ears up and said, oh, he's not really pronounced that one properly. I'm not a native.
Hmm.
That's one
Yeah.
unfortunate side of me, that I'm not a native. I would like to apologize to anyone who might
Yeah.
be in Hungary.
Although
Um,
I think most people when they hear a foreign accent, it can sound charming. So I don't think that anyone from Hungary is cringing right now. I think if anything,
let's hope.
it might sound charming to them to have a little different accent.
Hmm, exactly. Yeah. Yeah,
Thank,
it's
thank you. Is
it's
there anything
interesting.
that you want to share? I know we've taken up a lot of your busy time.
No, what I would like to say, we've really said this, but I like to reiterate points.
Hmm.
It's probably because I'm a teacher, and I reiterate
Yes.
points at the end of lessons as well. Be proud of the heritage you come from. Be proud of those languages
Hmm.
which are not spoken by a majority of people in the world. Be
Yeah,
proud of who you are,
that's wonderful. That is.
physically, mentally, and most importantly, because we're speaking here on a linguistic level,
Hmm.
linguistically. Be proud of yourself linguistically. And for all parents who might be thinking, oh, he's going on a bit, oh, he's typical British person, he doesn't know when to finish. Yeah, I'm British. I'm proud of myself
And
that
you're
I'm
proud of it.
British. But one thing I'm not proud of is Brexit and Boris Johnson.
Uh, got to get that out there.
Yeah, had to get that one out there, of course, yeah. I'd love to do this again in maybe 5 years' time and see how the
Yeah.
development has been going on over a five
Mhm.
5 year period.
Yeah. five
Um,
years, a lot can happen.
and I'd also be happy if you would be interested, and this is just between me and you, Heather. If you would like to guest post on my blog, contact me at any time. I'm always looking for people who are interested in promoting languages. So if you're interested in this, or any of our listeners might be interested in promoting, you're welcome, English in a way, in guest post writing for me, contact me. Yeah, you can give them the email address. You can drop it. You can leave the email address in the chat in the contact details. So
Yes,
I
I will
look
leave
forward
your
to hearing from
website.
people.
I'll leave your website and your email address so that if anyone is interested in checking out what you do and contacting you about that, they will have all the links necessary.
Super. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And yeah, I hope we can talk again soon. We'll see if I'm podcasting in 5 years. Hopefully. We'll see where this little project takes me. This is still the beginning of it, so we'll see. But thank you so much. I do appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. I hope you got as much out of that interview as I did. Tommy had so much to share, and I really learned a lot. If you'd like to keep in touch with him, I've got his website and his email address in the show notes. Take care, stay well, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.